Willkommen bei Chess Live, präsentiert vom Verein für berufliche Weiterbildung. Wie Sie schneller und effektiver Englisch lernen, das hängt von der Unterrichtsgestaltung ab. Wir engagieren in unserem Teacher Trainer Center Top-Ausbilder wie zum Beispiel Chess. Deshalb unterrichten wir nach modernsten Lernmethoden. Chess Live zeigt in einem lebhaften Interview, wie moderne Lernmethoden zu besseren Lernergebnissen führen. Kompakt in 8 Staffeln auf YouTube. Sehen Sie dazu auch, wie ein idealer Unterricht abläuft und wie er sogar Spaß machen kann. Wir wollen, dass jeder Fremdsprachen lernen kann. Klicken Sie hierzu auf weiterbildunginhamburg.de und sehen Sie unser riesiges Sprachangebot und die schönen Räume in der City Nord. Und jetzt kommt Chess Live.
Eine Aufnahme mit Fragen, die ich Chess stellen werde, der eine Model-Unterrichtsstunde gehalten hat. Und bevor man sich dieses Band anschaut, sollte man sich vorher die Modellstunde angucken. Und was ich machen werde, ist, ich werde Chess noch einige Fragen stellen, warum er bestimmte Sachen in der Unterrichtsstunde gemacht hat. Und einige Nachfragen zu seinem allgemeinen Teaching Approach, zu seinen allgemeinen Unterrichtsmethoden. Okay, Chess. First of all, what I noticed when I came into the lesson is that you didn't have any tables in the room. We had a circle of chairs, right? Can you comment on that?
Well, we decided to get rid of the desks for actually more than one reason. Number one, the furniture is too cumbersome. It takes up a lot of space. We think, that if you arrange students in a horseshoe shape, there's a lot more room for the teacher to move around. There's a lot more room for the students to move around, and that kind of setup is more conducive, to more genuine, perhaps, interaction, because there's a lot more that you can do. Students can move around, the teachers can move around, and asking students to stand and mingle is not an ordeal anymore. So with desks in the middle of the room, it may be complicated to achieve all that. That's the reason.
Mm-hmm. What would you say we often find we also have older people learning English? Some of them might say, we want the table, we want our coffee to have on the table, they want chit-chat. How would you answer that? Or?
Well, you're not gonna please everybody 100% of the time. You just need to explain that perhaps the advantages outnumber the disadvantages. Mm-hmm. And then I think what Luluf wants to do is replace the desks with chairs with folding desks, mm-hmm. so that people who like writing they won't complain anymore. Mm-hmm. Okay. They might not be able to keep the cup of coffee on the desk, but that's a minor inconvenience if you ask me.
Yes, yes.
You don't come to class to have a drink with your friends. You come to class because you want to have a good time, all right, but also because you want to learn. And if that kind of setup is more conducive to learning, then I think students will moan at first, but then eventually they'll buy into it, I think.
Mm. Do you do that in every lesson, or?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a much more flexible setup. Mm-hmm. Because you can ask students to work with to change partners and work with each other. Whereas if you teach in rows, for example, or if you teach with that becomes a lot more complicated.
Mm. But you would also prefer that they have something to write, of course. So the ideal thing would be tables and chairs.
Yeah. The other thing I think if you keep desks, if students sit at a desk, they become much more territorial. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really hard to ask them to stand and move around, because this is my space. Yes. So it's like cats. Cats are territorial, and the students can be territorial too. Whereas I don't think it's the same if you actually have students sit in chairs, arranged in a horseshoe shape sort of thing.
Yes. Okay. All right. Good. Maybe, before we start with this different exercises, could you say what the aim of the lesson was?
The aim, if I remember correctly, because it's been 3-4 days now, the aim was, for the students to talk about, past experiences and relate them to present. And it was also, in terms of skills, it was very much, speaking and a little bit of listening to each other, not just to me. That's what the main aim was. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. The clapping exercise at the beginning, what was that all about?
Well, oh yeah, the clapping exercise at the beginning was, you know, to just basically, that's at the very beginning. Well, because, you know, I think it's a nice way to help the students, you know, ease into the lesson. You know, it's an exercise that it's obvious, you know, it's not linguistically demanding. So the students, you know, are not supposed to produce language. You know, the language output is very, very minimum. But
sorry, Chess, that was actually the one where you had to walk around, what did you do on the weekend, and clap and change partners,
yes,
right?
yeah, but that's what I mean. It's, you know, talking about the weekend at that level, it's certainly not a very challenging task. You don't want, I think, you don't want to challenge your students, you know, first thing into the lesson. You want them to sort of, you know, give them a chance to ease into the lesson, you know, to stop thinking about, maybe just start thinking in English, okay, and, you know, get used, because, you know, you haven't seen these students for a week, you know, they live in Germany, you know, probably, you know, they haven't had any exposure whatsoever to English, you know, in these 6 days that you haven't seen. So I think, you know, the last thing you want to do is, you know, to give them, you know, something really challenging, you know, first thing into the lesson. So that asking the students to stand and clap and shake hands with the nearest partner and exchange information on what they did on the weekend, that it's non-threatening, and it gives them a chance, you know, to get the tongue around English, you know, without having to produce, you know, sophisticated language. Yeah.
And that's what you would call a warmer, right?
That's a warmer, you know, and that's, you know, the teacher, you know, gets out of the way altogether, or participates if he or she wants to. But I mean, that is not a time for correcting people's mistakes. You know, that is not a time to sort of, you know, to feed new language unless they ask you to. Yeah.
All right. How long is a warmer usually in your lesson, or?
Well, a warmer is a warmer, you know.
Yes.
A warmer, you know, is a warmer that lasts for more than 10 minutes, not a warmer anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. And you want to stop it, you know, before you know it drags on.
Yes.
You don't want the students to get bored. You know, a warmer is not the central part of a lesson.
Yes.
A warmer is just that. It's an icebreaker, you know. It's a little exercise, you know, to get the students ready, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Super. The next one was also interesting. You did the 1, 2, 3 exercise, right? Maybe you could just comment on that. I personally, and I can also imagine that some students are surprised that you do numbers that's not English.
Yeah, that's a little bit more than just a warmer, I have to say. You see, I believe that a lot of exercises that I do in class don't have a clear language teaching agenda, but they serve a different purpose, and that purpose is, you know, to get the students in a state of readiness. I want my students to be ready to perform. I want my students to feel good about being in class, and I also want my students, you know, to pay attention to what's going on. So that exercise, you know, works on the student's level of concentration. Again, there's very, very little at the beginning, at least, you know, the first 2 steps of the exercise. You know, the students are not supposed to produce language. It's, you know, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but they need to sort of, you know, pay attention. Okay. So the aim is not so much, you know, to get the students to work on language, to practice the person perfect or this and that structure. No, the aim is, you know, for the students, you know, to basically, you know, once again, concentrate and focus on what they're doing.
Wake up.
In a sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you switch to word conversation in this pattern, right?
Yes, but that was the last step. That was the last variation I offered, if you remember. You know. So once the students, you know, are warming up, you know, then I think the last step was, you know, for the students, you know, to build up a conversation using one word each as they go along. Yeah, that is obviously, you know, there is some kind of language production there, but it's a language learning classroom, so you can't just spend half an hour just having the students clap back and forth. That wouldn't make any sense. Once the students, you know, are ready, once the students, you know, are concentrating and, you know, they look a little bit more focused, then you can move on and do something that's a little bit more challenging.
Yes, okay. So that would also fall under warmer, though, this exercise, sort of, or how would you classify that in terms of whatever?
I don't know, really.
Yes.
I believe it's a little bit more than just a warmer.
Yes.
Because you know, it didn't last 3 minutes. You know, it went on for maybe 10 minutes. So I don't know what it is. What would you call it?
I would personally also think it's a different way of warmer. Maybe different. Walking around was relaxing, and this was sort of, you had to 3, 2, 1. You had to concentrate more. It was a bit more grammar because you had to make up 2 words. So it was maybe a bit less free variation or something. Of
yeah, but it was at the same time it wasn't controlled in the sense that was supposed to resemble the way a conversation works in practice. Conversation by definition is unpredictable. Okay, you never know. You might start talking about the weather, you end up talking about the situation in Iraq. You don't know. So that is the aim. But I don't think it's a warmer. I don't think it's a full-fledged activity. Maybe it's just a pre-task sort of thing.
Okay.
You know?
All right. Good.